Have you ever gotten tickets to a Carlos Alcaraz match or watched him in person on your screen and wondered, who the heck is this guy? Well, that makes two of us. And you can only feel for those at the other end of the rallies because Alcaraz is a complete player, but that's just scratching the surface. These are some of the biggest reasons why ATP players should be terrified of Carlos Alcaraz. He already defeated Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon and is literally on a roll. But let's quickly talk about the specifics in Alcaraz's game that make other tennis players want to avoid him. Alcaraz has gradually turned his serve into a real weapon, something we saw at the Wimbledon final where he produced 9 aces against the best returner in the world. Perhaps not as flattering as Hubert Hurkacz's 33 aces against Djokovic, but the point is, Alcaraz's serves, which he does with a pinpoint stance and an abbreviated swing, allows him to dictate play and set up points. He could back it up with a volley, a drop shot, a lob, a power shot, just about anything. Alcaraz assumes a wide base when he wants to return serves and is extremely comfortable with blocking returns from big servers. He's happy to use slices and work his way up the point. Now, patience is not something we get to see all the time from the younger tennis generation, but Carlos is different. And of course, something else makes his returns so efficient, which brings us to his movement. Alcaraz has a very good footwork pattern. He's super quick and explosive, which makes his court coverage nothing short of remarkable. He's also got great flexibility, which helps with his range of motion. But more importantly is what he does off the ball, because as soon as he hits the ball, he already starts setting himself up for the next attacking shot. And then we have his forehand, which we already know about. It's the best in the game. Raw power, dynamic, loaded with topspin, what else? He casually hits winners cross-court or down the line off the forehand and doesn't give opponents any breathing space. Let's move on to his net play. Most ATP players these days are just all about powerful hitting from the baseline, with not much variation. And with what I see from Carlitos, sometimes I begin to wonder what these other tennis players do in training, because it's been a while since we've seen tennis players with the same net awareness as Carlitos. His willingness to come forward and attack short balls to finish off points while covering both wings to avoid a passing shot is quite remarkable for a 20-year-old. And it's no surprise that his net points won percentage in the last 52 weeks borders on 70%. The moment he gets you wrong-footed, boom, he dashes to the net and does this. Okay, let's talk about Carlos' backhand. Perhaps not quite as good as Djokovic's backhand, but guess who had more point-winning backhands during the Wimbledon final? When on the attack, he uncoils the backhand properly and then recovers, unlike many other players who simply do not have the same rotational dynamic. And when you attack his backhand, the Spaniard then focuses on redirecting the ball with jabs in order to pile up positional pressure and use the opponent's pace against them. He can also use the slice to great effect, like we saw during the Wimbledon final. Next, we have the drop shots, which come with great disguise and make his ground strokes more effective because you hardly see those drop shots coming. No one knows this better than Stefanos Tsitsipas. Carlitos sets his drop shots on both wings with a normal forehand swing and then changes to a continental grip in a split second, leaving the opponent scrambling all over the place like a fish out of water. It's probably what happens when Tsitsipas meets someone with, many tools. Maybe. We don't have enough time to go into every single bit of Carlos's game, but this next one is one of the most important pieces of it. Choosing the right shot at the right moment more often than not is something that hasn't gone unnoticed with Alcaraz's game. Somehow, he knows just the right moment when to serve and volley, when to lob, when to go cross-court, and when to go down the line. They often say that tennis is not a game of perfection, rather it's a game of percentages. But we've got a 20-year-old who seems to be playing near-perfect tennis at the moment, staying laser-focused in the crucial moments. That's even the least of opponents' worries, because there is something to the Spaniard that is a lot scarier. And this begs the question, why should ATP players be terrified of Carlos Alcaraz? You probably didn't see this coming, but hold on. I'll give you my reasons. It's one thing to have a complete game, which many players don't even have, and quite another thing to thoroughly enjoy what you do. When Alcaraz plays, he enjoys himself on the court. We often see him smiling, fist pumping, laughing, cheering on the crowd, and all that. He's not afraid of the pressure. Rather, the 20-year-old is there to have a good time on the court. It might not sound like a lot, but I bet it makes a whole lot of difference performance-wise, because there's nothing like being free in the decisive moments. Singles tennis, in particular, can get really lonely at some point, especially when things aren't going your way. So one of the biggest things you can rely on is your mental strength to get going. Case in point, we saw how Alcaraz's nerves resurfaced at the opening set of the Wimbledon final against Novak, but just look at how he picks himself up and gets settled after the first set. Now the thing is that for many of the other top players, they might be able to come away unscathed against other players, but for a player of Djokovic's caliber, it often ends in the same way, a lopsided loss. At best, they'll steal a set, maybe get an early break, and then buckle under the pressure. Well, Daniil Medvedev did at the 2021 US Open, and who knows? Carlitos' win against Nole might have been a one-off, but Alcaraz, more than the others, gets through those nerves against other top players at the highest level because he has something that not many other players have. Let's take a look at the highlight of the 2022 Roland Garros quarterfinal match between Alcaraz and Zverev. Carlos decides to play whack-a-mole with his German opponent. First, he follows up a powerful serve with a drop shot off the backhand to bring Zverev to net. Then he lobs him over, leaving the German scampering before finishing him off with a drop shot off the forehand. That was filthy, but it's what happens when you have so many shots to rely on. Alcaraz, we should note, did lose that match, but it gave us an idea of what was to come. Now here's the thing. Playing for fun on its own isn't really a big deal. I mean, Nick Kyrgios, Gael Monfils, Fabio Fognini all do this pretty well, right? But how many of them have pulled off the kind of results that we've seen from Carlos Alcaraz? Exactly. This brings us to the next point. Here is what former world number 5 Taylor Fritz had to say about Alcaraz's intensity after meeting the Spaniard earlier this year in Miami.
Yeah. How do you compare it to the first time you played Roger and Rafa and Novak?
Oh, I definitely felt like I had more breathing room against those guys than in this match. I think that it's different game styles. Novak, will have these long rallies, but he'll kind of just like slowly get you out of position and overwhelm me. But I still feel like I can just like kind of hang in these rallies for a long time and get more chances to like attack. And I think that I go back to the first couple of games of the match, like he just winner off of a lot of shots that winners and shots that hurt me off of a lot of shots that people normally aren't hurting me off of. So definitely less. I just felt like he was more offensive and pressed me a lot more.
That pretty much sets the tone for what we're going to highlight in the next few minutes. The intensity from Carlitos is an absolute belter, and it's one of the biggest weapons that scares other players. It's so difficult to play against someone who just keeps coming at you while having fun. Man, that's gotta be scary. I mean, that's like getting in the ring with Mike Tyson, or something like that. Has to be something similar, because the combination of baseline power and court coverage smothers other ATP players before they even get the chance to find their rhythm in the point. So what does that mean? Alcaraz mostly ends up being in control of the rallies. We've seen it happen against Daniil Medvedev twice this year, against Holger Rune, Taylor Fritz, many times, in fact all the time, 5 times against Stefanos Tsitsipas. Casper Ruud hasn't beaten the 20-year-old in 3 attempts. Perhaps the only players who can give Carlitos a run for his money are Novak Djokovic, Jannik Sinner, FAA, and maybe Alexander Zverev. But the thing is that the amount of effort Carlitos puts into every ball, the way he chases everything, means you have to be at your very best just to even stand a chance. It's the relentless attack from every part of the court, and then using every part of the court to expose opponents' weaknesses. It's a little different from Novak Djokovic's style of building pressure in subtle ways, using depth and line balls more often than outright power. Juan Carlos Ferrero has certainly done a great job in helping Carlos come up with the right intensity on the return. As a result, Alcaraz tops the charts in percentage of first serve return points won and percentage of return games won during the last 52 weeks. It's also the same story when it comes to the under pressure versus top 10 players leaderboard in the past 52 weeks as well. He has saved over 60% of break points while managing to convert close to 40% against the very best on the ATP Tour. The intensity from the 20-year-old comes from his powerful offense, but you know the scary part? He's equally good on defense. We've seen players make lots of errors and questionable decisions when they're moved around. When rushed and out of position, even their best shots break down, but not so often with the world number 1. Now we've got a player who has a complete game, has the intensity, and actually loves his job. By the way, we all love our jobs, don't we? So there's one more thing, which I think is just as important as the intensity and all-court game. I'd like to call it mass appeal. Alcaraz is the kind of guy who can give his best in front of large crowds and do exactly the same thing even when no one is watching. Novak's style of play might not be the most entertaining, but it is effective enough to tear through any top 10 player, including Carlitos. But the thing with Alcaraz and his game is that there is a certain appeal to it. His style automatically makes him a highlight machine, but where am I going with this? In an era where our attention and fandom is fought for by a saturated sports and media market, Alcaraz's dynamic and colorful game has prevailed and drawn new fans to the sport. The implication that he will almost always have the crowd behind him, and except when you have a player like Novak Djokovic who thrives off negative energy from the crowd, it doesn't sound too good for other tennis players because the crowd certainly makes a difference, and the last thing that players want is to be playing against a complete player who's bringing the heat while enjoying himself with the crowd on his side. Pretty much sounds like an uneven matchup, doesn't it? We saw something similar with young Roger Federer, and even when Rafa came around, it really didn't affect the adoration he received from the crowd. One rather funny criticism of Pete Sampras' game was that it was often too clinical for casual fans. If there was any player who could rely on something to get out of trouble, it had to be Pete's serve. First or second serve, I should say. The amount of topspin and high-velocity kick made it hard to return. Imagine a guy just losing a game and he casually just strolls up and fires a 120-mile-an-hour second serve. Powerful, accurate, and consistent. Yet Sampras' serves were easy on his body and didn't seem to take too much out of him. Another player whose game has been seen as too clinical for casual fans is Djokovic. He drags you to deep waters with seemingly boring baseline rallies, making you lose confidence in your best shots. But isn't that a good thing? You see, as a casual fan who just paid hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars to see a Grand Slam final, you'd want to see some kind of drama, sort of. It's important to remember that sports are in the entertainment business at the end of the day, and players like Alcaraz are the real deal. Blending excitement with winning is a talent in itself. Roger Federer was able to do that, which is why he transcended the sport into becoming a cultural icon in his own right. His elegance and graceful style of play endeared him to millions of fans. Novak, meanwhile, sacrifices flair for efficiency. Kyrgios Entertainment hasn't gotten the biggest results just yet. Alcaraz has certainly found the balance and won 2 majors, 4 Masters 1000s, and counting. Honestly, it wouldn't even surprise me if at this point, Carlitos ends up with one of the largest fan bases we've ever seen. Now, how do all these points add up? Let's briefly touch the issue of adaptability and problem solving. The gap between Alcaraz and the rest of the field seems even wider than it has been before. And that's not because the other guys aren't good players. It's just that we often see a lack of adaptability from them. For instance, Tsitsipas just hasn't figured out how to make his backhand formidable, and he'll be 25 soon. 27-year-old Daniil Medvedev keeps standing so far away from the baseline against Alcaraz when it clearly doesn't help him. Rublev's slice backhand is almost non-existent, and his net play isn't great either at 25. We could go on and on. The truth is that seeing a 20-year-old learn the basics so fast should be terrifying for other players, because he's just getting started. With more nuance to his game, as the years go by, the world number 1 will become unstoppable, and other players will barely have any shot at winning big titles because they are yet to really weave the problem-solving ability into the fabric of their game. It took Carlos Alcaraz just 1 match against Novak Djokovic to fix his serves. Really, it doesn't get any better than that. As it turns out, the 20-year-old Spaniard is pretty much the fastest learner on the tour, and unlike other players who keep learning into their late 20s, he seems to have everything figured out at 20. At the end of the day, the game of tennis is all about solving problems that your opponents throw at you, and Carlos has shown that it literally doesn't have to take forever for that to happen. Now, I know that there are a lot of variables. His coaching team and their methods, his physicality, and all that. I'm not trying to downplay the hard work of the other guys. No. But I think this is something that should be a reality check for the rest of the tour, because every time I see something new about Carlitos, the hype seems more real. By the way, should we make a video about some of the competitors? Jannik Sinner? Holger Rune maybe? What do you guys think? It would be a great injustice not to remind ourselves of the gravity of the results that Alcaraz has achieved so far. So, Carlos Alcaraz has beaten Novak Djokovic on grass, Rafael Nadal on clay, Daniil Medvedev on hard court, and has won majors on both grass and hard courts. He is literally beating the best of the best on their preferred surfaces. It kind of gives you an idea of what is coming up next. The world number one certainly has a few French Open titles in him because clay still seems to be his best surface. That said, his tally will probably not be close to Rafa's, but who cares? The Spaniard's performances should terrify other players because they've been around for much longer than him, and apart from Daniil Medvedev, who denied Djokovic in 2021, none of the other players can boast of winning the biggest titles or sitting atop the rankings. To be the best, you have to be excellent on all surfaces, and that's exactly what Alcaraz has done. As a reward for his efforts, Alcaraz has sat atop the rankings, and he's been there for more than 30 weeks now. So, with the most complete skill set, time on his side, experience on the big stage, and a mental fortitude that we've never seen in such a young player, Carlitos has proven to be a force to be reckoned with. His growth mindset and willingness to learn despite his sky-high expectations are something to watch, and as he continues to mature, other top tennis players will likely see opportunities become few and far between. But who knows? We might be in for another surprise. Apart from Novak, who do you guys see as the standout challenger to Alcaraz in the near future? Is it Holger Rune, Jannik Sinner, FAA, Lorenzo Musetti? What do you guys think? We'll now turn our attention to the hardcourt season in North America to confirm if the balance of power has truly shifted to the side of Carlitos. Only time will tell, but let's enjoy the moment for now. Meanwhile, here's what the legends of the sport think of Carlos Alcaraz.